When a terrified little boy appeared in the aisle mid-flight with no parent in sight, the entire cabin froze, until Sandra Bullock quietly stood up and wrapped him in her arms, with Keanu Reeves beside her. What began as a potential in air emergency turned into a breathtaking act of courage and kindness, ending with one life-changing decision they made before the plane even landed. The boy in the aisle. I didn't plan to cry on a red-eye flight from Los Angeles to New York. I just wanted 3 hours of bad airplane coffee and worse sleep, not a story I'd still be telling years later. The cabin lights were already dimmed when we leveled off above the clouds, that strange blue-black glow filling the windows. I was in seat 18C, aisle, headphones in, pretending my life didn't feel like it was quietly collapsing at 37,000 feet. 2 rows ahead of me, on the opposite side, a woman in a simple beige cardigan tried to disappear behind a paperback. Next to her, a man in a black blazer kept his head down, hair falling over his face, one hand loosely wrapped around a paper cup of tea. It took me a few minutes to realize who they were, because they weren't doing any of the things celebrities are supposed to do. No sunglasses, no attitude, no performance. Just 2 people trying to be left alone. Sandra Bullock, Keanu Reeves, on my cramped, overbooked, absolutely ordinary flight. The couple in front of me whispered about it first, trying not to stare. The teenage boy across the aisle pretended not to care but kept sneaking glances, phone half raised as if just checking the time. I watched them too, a little fascinated and a little annoyed at myself for being fascinated. I told myself it didn't matter, famous people fly just like the rest of us. Still, something about the way they blended in, the way Sandra gently thanked the flight attendant for a blanket, the way Keanu moved his knees aside so an older man could pass, stuck with me. We'd been in the air for maybe 40 minutes when the first small thing went wrong. It was barely noticeable at first, a slight bump like the plane had rolled over a pothole in the sky. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and practiced, asking everyone to keep their seat belts fastened. A few overhead bins rattled, plastic against plastic. Somewhere behind me, a baby gave a nervous cry and then quieted. People shifted, sighed, went back to their movies. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it. A single sharp word that sliced through the low hum of engines and conversation. "Mom." It came from the middle of the cabin, small and thin, like it had already tried to be brave and failed. I pulled out one earbud and turned. A boy stood alone in the aisle. He couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9, hair sticking up in every direction as if he'd fallen asleep hard and woken up too fast. One hand clutched a worn teddy bear by the arm, the other gripped the armrest of a random seat, knuckles white. He wasn't seated next to whoever belonged there. In fact, the man in that seat was leaning as far away from him as possible, eyes darting around as if silently pleading for a flight attendant to appear. The boy's eyes were wide, the kind of wide that comes right before panic. He turned slowly, scanning row after row of faces, his chest beginning to rise and fall too fast. "Mom," he tried again, louder this time. This was the moment where, in a normal flight, a tired mother would pop up from a nearby row, half apologizing, half scolding. But nobody stood. People just stared. Some looked over their shoulders, expecting an answer to come from behind them. Others pretended not to see him at all, shrinking into their seats the way people do when a responsibility isn't technically theirs. I felt that same instinct in myself, the quiet wish that someone better equipped, someone more patient, someone less exhausted would handle it. I was on this flight to sign away the last papers of my divorce, not to get involved in someone else's family drama at 37,000 feet. The boy took one uncertain step forward, then another, the teddy bear dragging against the floor. He reached the empty space beside Sandra's row and stopped like his courage had run out. The flight attendant nearest to us, a young woman with her hair in a tight bun, unbuckled quickly and hurried over, keeping one hand on the seatbacks as the plane gave another small shudder. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly, dropping to a knee so she could look him in the eye. "Where's your seat? Where's Mom or Dad?" The boy swallowed. Up close, he looked even smaller, drowning in a gray zip-up hoodie 2 sizes too big. His fingers twisted in the teddy bear's fur. I can't find her," he said. She was right here." Something in his voice made the hairs on my arms stand up. It wasn't the normal whine of a bored kid. It was raw confusion laced with the beginning of fear. A few passengers exchanged looks, nervous curiosity turning into something heavier. "Okay," the flight attendant said, practiced soothing tone slipping just a little. "What's your name?" "Eli." "Hi, Eli, I'm Jess." She glanced around the cabin, scanning for someone who might claim him. "Are you traveling with your mom tonight?" He nodded quickly. "And what's her name?" His mouth opened, then closed. He blinked like someone had just shined a light in his face. I don't know," he whispered. The air in the cabin shifted. You could feel it like pressure before a storm. Sandra closed her book. It was such a small movement, but somehow it drew every eye. She unbuckled her seat belt with a quiet click, ignoring the fasten seat belt sign that had just lit up again. Keanu glanced at her, then at the boy, and I swear I saw something like worry cross his face. Not the shallow kind you put on for paparazzi photos, but something older, deeper. Jess, the flight attendant, hesitated. Protocol said she shouldn't have anyone up, especially not now, not with the turbulence worsening. But the boy's breathing was turning into little gasps, his chest hitching. "I don't," she was holding my hand, Eli stammered. "We got on the plane and then." His eyes filled suddenly, tears spilling over without warning. Sandra moved before anyone else could. She slid into the aisle, steadying herself with one hand on the seatback, and crouched down beside Jess, her voice low and warm. "Hey," she said, as if she'd known him his whole life. "You're okay, you hear me, you're okay." Eli turned toward her like a magnet. For a second, the celebrity thing broke through. A murmur rippled through the rows, people realizing exactly who was kneeling there, telling this trembling little boy it was going to be all right. I watched her face, half expecting some trace of performance, some awareness of all the eyes on her. There was none. Her whole attention was on him, on the way his fingers shook, on the tightness of his jaw as he tried not to sob. "Can you sit here with us for a minute?" she asked, nodding toward her row. "Just until we figure things out." Eli hesitated, eyes flicking to Jess, then back to Sandra. Jess gave him an encouraging smile. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jess said. "You can sit right there. I'll go check the system. All right, we'll find your mom." Keanu had already shifted, unbuckling and sliding toward the window, making space without a word. He leaned back slightly, giving the boy room, his expression soft but alert, like he was ready to stand up fast if he needed to. Eli let go of the armrest and took the smallest step forward. Then another. Sandra gently guided him into the seat between them, buckled his belt, and kept a hand on his shoulder, steady and calm. Behind them, I could see Jess making her way toward the galley, moving faster than a casual walk but not quite a run. She disappeared behind the curtain. The plane jolted again, harder this time. A few people gasped. A drink cart clanged from somewhere up front. The captain's voice returned, still calm but a little tighter, asking everyone once more to remain seated. Eli flinched, shoulders curling in. Sandra murmured something I couldn't hear. Keanu glanced back toward the galley, then to the emergency exit, as if quietly mapping out the whole plane in his mind. Minutes passed, stretched thin. The cabin fell into a strained silence, broken only by the drone of the engines and the soft, shuddering breaths of the child between the two movie stars. I realized my own hands were clenched around the armrests, not because of the turbulence, but because of the look on his face, a mixture of hope and dread, like he was afraid of what the answer might be. At last, the curtain rustled. Jess returned, another flight attendant behind her, the older one who had done the safety demonstration at the beginning. Both of their faces were wrong, too controlled, too careful. They stopped beside Sandra's row. Jess crouched again so she was at Eli's eye level. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes this time. "Hey, Eli," she said softly. "I checked our list, okay? All the passengers, everyone who got on this plane." He stared at her, gripping the teddy bear so tightly his knuckles went white. "And," Sandra prompted gently. Jess swallowed, glanced up just once at Keanu, then around the cabin at all the watching faces. When she spoke again, her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "There's no child booked under your name," she said. No unaccompanied minor, no Eli at all. According to our records, you're not on this flight." The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible and heavy. Eli's mouth fell open. For a heartbeat, nothing moved, not the passengers, not the attendants, not even the boy's eyelids. Then his lower lip trembled. They lost me," he whispered, the sound cracking. "They lost me again." Sandra's hand tightened on his shoulder. Keanu's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a kind of sharp focus that made him suddenly look very awake. All around them, people shifted in their seats, the question forming on 100 silent lips at once. How does a child appear in the middle of a flight that says he was never there? The question no one could answer. People started talking all at once. The quiet drone of the engines was suddenly wrapped in whispers, in the rustle of jackets, in the metallic clink of seat belts being unbuckled and rebuckled by nervous hands. It felt like the whole plane leaned toward that one row, toward the boy who officially did not exist. Eli stared at Jess, as if she'd just told him the sky was gone. "What do you mean I'm not here?" he whispered. "I'm here, I'm right here." Sandra kept her hand on his shoulder as steady as an anchor. "She means the computer can't find you," she said gently. "Sometimes computers get confused, happens to me all the time." She offered the smallest smile, trying to pull him back from the edge. "But you and I know you're here, right?" He nodded, but it was shaky, like he no longer trusted the ground under him. The older flight attendant, the one who'd come back with Jess, shifted her weight. "We double-checked the manifest," she said, voice low but carrying. "There's no record of a child boarded alone, no Eli, no unaccompanied minor, no missing parent either." A man in a suit across the aisle raised his voice. "So how did he get on the plane?" he demanded. "You're telling me a kid can just appear in the cabin? That's a security issue." A nervous laugh rippled from somewhere behind me, the kind of laugh that's really fear in disguise. The word security spread like smoke, soft, then sharp. Jess straightened. "Sir, please stay seated." "So he's a stowaway," another passenger muttered. "Or someone put him here." Eli shrank into himself at that, like the words were blows. I felt a hot, sudden anger rise in my chest, not at the questions, but at the way none of us had even thought about how they sounded to a child. Keanu leaned forward slightly, voice calm but firm. "He's a scared kid," he said. "That's what he is, let's start there." The tone of the cabin shifted again. It was subtle, but I could feel it. The way people fell quiet, the way some of the harsher edges of fear softened into shame. Sandra turned back to Eli. "Hey," she said, softer now. "You said they lost you again. What did you mean by that?" His throat worked as he swallowed. For a second, it looked like he might refuse to answer at all. Then he lifted the teddy bear and hugged it to his chest. "They lost me at the bus station once," he said, "and at the grocery store, and at the fair with the yellow rides." His eyes flicked between Sandra and Keanu, pleading without words to be believed. "They always say they're sorry, but then they forget to come back on time. The lady said this time I was going somewhere good, somewhere permanent." "Which lady?" Sandra asked gently. "The one with the red scarf," he said, as if that explained everything. "She said I was finally going to see my mom in New York, that this time they wouldn't mess it up." Jess and the older attendant exchanged a look over his head. It was quick but loaded, recognition of something they didn't want to say out loud. "Do you remember getting on the plane?" Keanu asked. He wasn't leaning in too close. He gave the boy space, but his eyes were steady on Eli's face, grounding him. Eli frowned like he was trying to see through fog. "There was a big window," he said slowly. "I watched the other planes, and there were chairs, lots of chairs, and everyone was talking. Then she held my hand, the lady with the scarf. We went through the beeping thing." He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to drag the memory up. "Then she told me to sit by the big number and wait and not to move. I waited. I did what she said. Then it got loud. There was a door, and then I was on the plane." "You didn't talk to anyone at the gate," Jess pressed gently. "No one scanned your ticket." "I don't know," he whispered. "I just did what they always tell me. Don't cause trouble, stay where you're put." The older attendant sighed through her nose, a tiny sound of frustration with no clear target. "If he was with a social worker, they should have checked in at the desk," she murmured. "We'd have the paperwork." So maybe the desk screwed up, someone muttered from 2 rows back. Or security did. Either way, if he's not supposed to be here, don't we have to land? That word land sent a ripple down my spine. Diverting a flight meant something serious. People around me started doing the math in their heads, missed connections, hotel rooms, meetings ruined. I could almost hear the selfish calculations clicking into place. Sandra looked up, eyes suddenly sharp. "No one has to do anything to him," she said, voice quiet but edged with steel. "He's not a problem to get rid of, he's a person." Her words cut through the muttering better than any announcement. Even the businessman in the suit looked away, cheeks coloring. Jess straightened as if reminded of something important. "I spoke with the captain," she said. "He's on the phone with the airline and TSA right now. They're checking camera footage from the gate, verifying every boarding pass. Until we know what happened, Eli needs to stay seated and calm." And she hesitated, then looked at Sandra and Keanu. "Since he seems to trust you too, the captain is asking if you're willing to stay with him. Officially." Keanu blinked. "Officially how?" he asked. "As in," the older attendant said, pulling a folded form from her apron pocket. "Temporary in-flight guardianship. It's not legal custody, it just means that for the rest of this flight, if we hit an emergency or have to divert, you're the point people for him. It also means you'll probably get questioned when we land." The whole cabin leaned in a little more. This was the part where, in most stories, the celebrities would smile politely, duck the attention, say something like, "Maybe someone else is better qualified." Instead, Sandra looked at Eli. Really looked at him. The shaky breaths, the tight grip on the bear, the way his eyes darted around like he was ready to be left again at any moment. "You okay with that?" she asked him. "If we're your people until we figure this out." He stared at her as if she'd offered him a country instead of a seat on a plane. Slowly, he nodded. "Then yeah," she said, turning back to the attendants. "We'll sign whatever you need." You could feel the surprise sweep through the rows. It wasn't loud, but it was there, a kind of stunned respect. They weren't making a speech about it or looking around to see who was watching. They just picked up the pen. As Keanu scribbled his name, Jess pressed a finger to her earpiece, listening to the captain's voice. Her face changed, brows lifting, mouth tightening. She glanced toward the front of the plane, then back at us. "The cameras at the gate show every passenger boarding," she said, more to herself at first. "Everyone from the first stroller to the last guy with the roller bag." "And?" the older attendant asked. Jess swallowed. "They say there's no footage of a child matching his description going through the door," she said. "Not with a social worker, not alone. They checked it twice. According to the cameras, he never walked onto this plane." A chill slid through me, ridiculous and real at the same time. Eli hugged his teddy closer and whispered, "They lost me before I even got on." Jess didn't answer. She just touched his hair lightly, then straightened, her professional mask locking into place. "The captain wants to speak to you," she told Sandra and Keanu quietly. "Both of you up front." Sandra glanced at Eli, then at the narrow aisle leading toward the closed cockpit door. "I'm not leaving him." "You don't have to," Jess said. "Bring him." She looked around at the rest of us. "Everyone else, please remain seated. We'll update you as soon as we can." The fastened seatbelt sign chimed again, bright and insistent. The plane gave another uneasy shiver, as if the sky itself didn't like what it was hearing. Sandra unbuckled Eli's belt with careful fingers. "You up for a little walk?" she asked. His hand slid into hers without hesitation this time, small and desperate. As they stepped into the aisle, Keanu falling in on his other side, the three of them moved slowly toward the front. One tiny, trembling figure flanked by two people who had no idea yet how much this choice would cost them. The cockpit door loomed ahead, locked and solid. Just before they reached it, the intercom chimed again, and the captain's voice came through, tighter now, every word shaped by something more than routine. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we need your full attention. We've encountered a situation on board that is highly unusual." The door clicked, began to open from the inside, and every pair of eyes in the cabin followed that little boy as he stepped toward whatever answer waited behind it. The choice at 37,000 feet. The front galley felt smaller than I'd ever noticed. A narrow wedge of metal and coffee smell where the world suddenly seemed to be making decisions about a single 9-year-old boy. From my seat a few rows back, I could see just past the curtain whenever it shifted, catching flashes of uniforms and concerned faces. The captain stood with one hand braced on the doorframe, headset pushed back around his neck. Up close, you could see the strain in the lines around his eyes. This was not part of the script he'd rehearsed for years. "Thank you for coming up," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm Captain Harris. I understand you're sitting with the child." "He's sitting with us," Sandra corrected softly. Eli was pressed against her side, fingers twisted in her cardigan. "We're just the set dressing." Something like a smile flickered over the captain's face and was gone. "Right. Here, what we know. Gate footage shows every passenger boarding this aircraft, but no sign of him. Our manifest has no record of his name. Ground control confirms there's no unaccompanied minor scheduled on this flight at all." "So somebody messed up," Keanu said. "Badly." "It's more than a mess up," Harris replied. "An unidentified passenger on a domestic flight opens a whole box of regulations. TSA and corporate security are already involved. They want to know if he's been coached, if he's a distraction for something else, if someone used him to test our systems." Eli flinched at that, eyes going wide. "I'm not a test," he whispered. Sandra crouched down so they were eye level. "He's a kid who's been lost more times than any child ever should be," she said, not looking away from Eli as she spoke to the captain. "That's the part that matters right now." Harris exhaled slowly. "I don't disagree," he said. "But I have 200 other souls on this plane to worry about as well. I can't ignore protocol. The folks on the ground are telling me we may have to divert, land early, put everyone through additional screening." "You're going to turn this into a punishment for him," Keanu said quietly, "because the adults around him failed." That landed harder than any raised voice would have. The captain's jaw worked for a second. "I'm just telling you the reality," he said. "When we land, law enforcement and child protective services will meet the aircraft. They'll want to separate him, interview him, probably separately from whoever's been with him on board." At that, Eli's fingers dug into Sandra's sleeve. "No," he blurted. "Please, don't let them put me back in the room." "What room?" she asked. "The white one," he said. His breathing sped up, the words tumbling out. "With the buzzing lights and the chairs that squeak and the cold floor. They make you sit there and wait while they talk about you like you're a homework sheet they lost." The captain's mouth opened, then closed again. For a heartbeat, he wasn't a uniform. He was just a man listening to a child talk about being processed like luggage. Sandra laid a hand over Eli's on her arm. "Look at me," she said softly. When he finally did, her voice dropped even lower. "If we can't stop them from asking questions, we can at least make sure you're not alone when they do. Okay." He swallowed. They're not going to send me back, are they?" he asked. "Back to the place with the numbers on the doors." Something inside me twisted. I thought of the hotel I was flying to, of the empty apartment that waited after, of how I'd been telling myself I was the loneliest person I knew. I felt suddenly ashamed. "We don't know yet," she answered honestly. "But we're not going to let them decide anything about you without somebody in the room who actually sees you. Deal." She held out her pinky. It was such a simple, almost childish gesture, and somehow that made it more powerful. After a moment's hesitation, Eli linked his own small finger with hers. Keanu turned to the captain. "Let us stay with him through whatever happens when we land," he said. "If you need a responsible adult's name on a form, use mine. I'll sign it. I'll talk to whoever I have to talk to." Harris studied him. "This could get complicated," he warned. "Police interviews, media if this leaks. You sure you want that?" "I'm sure he doesn't want to walk off this plane into a room full of strangers again," Keanu replied. "If you're asking me to pick which discomfort I'd rather live with, I'll take the paperwork." Sandra gave a small, almost incredulous laugh. "Look at us," she murmured. "We got on this plane to get some sleep and maybe a bad movie. Now we're negotiating with Homeland Security." Life's weird, Keanu said. Then more seriously to the captain, what do you need from us right now? Harris hesitated, listening to his earpiece as someone crackled in his ear. They're still arguing on the ground, he said finally. But with the turbulence building and the fuel situation, diverting might actually be the safest option anyway. If we do, it's going to upset a lot of people back there. He jerked his head toward the cabin. I could use your help keeping things calm. People listen to you. Only if there are explosions and car chases involved, Sandra said dryly. But we'll try. The plane shuddered again, harder this time. A cabinet door rattled, cups clinked against one another in their stacks. Jess pulled back the curtain, eyes wide. We need everyone seated, she said. Now we're hitting a rough patch. Sandra and Keanu guided Eli back down the aisle, hands light but protective on his shoulders. As they passed my row, Sandra glanced at me just for a second, and I saw the same mix of fear and determination I felt churning in my own stomach. Back at their seats, they buckled in quickly. The cabin lights dimmed further, that eerie half-dark that always makes the air feel thinner. The engine's pitch rose as the plane started a slow, careful turn. Are we falling? Eli asked, voice too loud, too raw. Not even close, Keanu said, keeping his tone steady. The pilot's just taking us on a little detour. Think of it like when you're walking home and you see a big puddle, so you go around it instead of through. Another jolt made the overhead bins tremble. Somewhere a baby started wailing in earnest now, her earlier whimpers turning into full-throated panic. A woman gasped. Someone swore under their breath. I realized my own breathing had gone shallow. My rational brain knew this was normal turbulence, that planes were built for this. But fear isn't rational, and right now fear was contagious. Up front, the loudspeaker cracked on. Folks, this is your captain, Harris said, strain still tightly controlled. We're going to be diverting to Chicago tonight due to a combination of weather and a unique situation on board. We'll get you on the ground as safely and quickly as possible. For now, I need everyone seated with your belts fastened. Flight attendants, take your seats. A low wave of groans rolled through the cabin. Frustration, disappointment, the sound of plans dissolving in midair. A man somewhere behind me exploded. You've got to be kidding me, he shouted. We're diverting because of some kid who doesn't even have a ticket. Eli's shoulders jerked as if he'd been struck. I watched the words hit him, each one a weight he'd been trained to pick up and carry. Problem, burden, reason. Sandra didn't even turn around. She just reached for the call button, that tiny plastic disc that usually meant more ice chips or a blanket. Jess appeared almost instantly, already braced against the bumping floor. Can I help you? She asked. Yes, Sandra said, keeping her voice level but letting it carry just enough. Can you please remind people that there are more important things in the world than arriving on time? A few people shifted, embarrassed. The man who'd shouted sank lower in his seat, staring at his tray table. Jess's mouth twitched, like she wanted to smile but knew she shouldn't. I'll make an announcement, she said, and for what it's worth, thanks. She squeezed Sandra's shoulder before hurrying back to her jump seat. The plane dipped, then rose, a roller coaster with no view of the tracks. Eli's hands flew to the armrests, white-knuckled. I don't like this, he gasped. Me neither, I heard myself say. I hadn't planned to speak, but the words were already out. I uncurled my fingers from my own armrests and leaned into the aisle as far as my belt would let me. You know what I do when I'm scared on planes? I asked him. I pick someone braver than me and copy their breathing, like cheating on a test but with oxygen. His eyes flickered toward me, then to Sandra, then to Keanu. Whose breathing do you want to copy? Sandra asked. Eli thought for half a second. Yours, he said quietly. She grinned just a little. Good choice. Watch. She exaggerated one slow inhale, then an even slower exhale. Keanu matched her rhythm. After a few shaky tries, Eli did too. I found myself falling into step with them, all four of us inhaling and exhaling like some strange, seat-belted choir. The engines hummed. The cabin creaked. The world outside was invisible black, but inside our little row there was a pocket of something steady, something stubborn. I'm still scared, Eli said, breath whispering in and out. Courage isn't what you feel, Sandra told him. It's what you do while you feel it. He let that sit for a moment, like he was tasting the words. What are we going to do when we land? He asked finally. If they want to take me away again. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a long look over his head. There was worry there, but also something like a decision hardening into place. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Keanu said. Sandra shook her head. No, she murmured, he's crossed too many bridges alone. She turned back to Eli, eyes clear now. When we land, she said, we're walking off this plane with you, not in front of you, not behind you, with you. Whatever room they want to put you in, we go to, fair. Can they do that? I asked before I could stop myself. I don't know, she admitted, but we're going to find out. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, city lights were starting to glow faintly below us, scattered constellations on the ground. The seat belt sign stayed on. The engines eased down just a little as the plane began its slow descent into the unknown. Eli looked from the window to the two people beside him, then to the rows of strangers who had suddenly stopped feeling entirely like strangers. For the first time since he'd appeared in that aisle, I saw something new in his expression. It wasn't safety, not yet. It was the fragile, dangerous beginning of trust. And as the wheels inched closer to that runway, I couldn't shake the thought that whatever waited for him in that airport would demand more of all of us than we had ever planned to give.